Today on The State of Us, what makes a great internship for companies and interns? Many companies use summer internships as a springboard for hiring, but they don't always do a good job of making sure their programs deliver big benefits to the interns and the company, according to a recent piece in the Wall Street Journal report. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson.
Good day, folks. And why is this important? Well, it's important because I believe we're looking at a time when workers, are looking for certain things out of a business, and business are looking for qualified workers. So the internship is one way for these two groups to get together and maybe make a long-term marriage. But if you stumble and you don't make a good impression, then the friendship never occurs. And so I think this is really important as we talk about the job market all the time on this show, and we talk about the economy. This is a tool that businesses have and that young workers have to test each other out. And let's make the process as good as we can so that we can be more productive in placing the right workers with the right companies.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a tight job market, obviously, when people are struggling to find qualified workers, it's that question of, well, are we going to wait for the right person to come to us, the qualified person to come to us, or are we going to create the qualified people? And of course, the answer probably should be a mix of both. You maybe shouldn't rely all on one or the other, but internships at their best are a way to create a future talent pool, whether for your business directly or just the industry at large. And, at worst, they can just be a waste of everybody's time. Because even if, another thing with internships is maybe you're not going to end up working at that company. If it's a positive experience, even if it's not the industry that you work in, you're building those connections, starting that networking process. And if it goes well for everybody, those could be relationships that down the road are helpful. Both to, again, we talk so much about the value of internships to interns. And I think part of what we want to focus on today is how do we make them valuable for companies too? So the article tells us Jennifer Deal is a senior research scientist at the Center for Effective Organizations. And she says, quote, think about internships like dating. Is the company looking for one date or a long-term relationship? If the latter, realize that the intern will need to feel valued, get something they desire, like relevant experiences, and feel as if there's a future for them at the company, or you won't get the second date, let alone the long-term employee relationship you're looking for. So we're going to look at 7 ingredients to a successful internship.
All right.
First is to set reasonable expectations. Some companies give giant sales pitches rather than helping interns understand what they are actually going to be doing. For example, sometimes referred to as the seduction strategy, managers might take interns to fancy restaurants with top executives at each table or have nights out at professional sporting events. This leaves the impression that these events will be regularly occurring when interns come to work full-time. Though this seldom actually happens, similarly, managers might stress, for instance, how much fun it is to work there, or how exciting the work is, or how close-knit everyone in the organization is. They fall short, however, when it comes to setting realistic expectations about day-to-day work.
Well, and going back to that dating response, if you take them out to a 5-star restaurant and the concert of their favorite artist on the first date, where do you go from there?
Right.
What do you do, right?
Well,
if you shoot the your whole wad there on the first date, and it's like, okay, what are we doing next time?
Well, that's all I got.
I don't know. That's it.
That's
maybe
all,
we can
folks.
go to your place and sit on the couch and watch a Netflix movie and have some popcorn that we put in the microwave. Really? You want me to go out with you again after you did? So, I mean, that it's very basic, right? Human instinct. You want to put your best foot forward, but you want to obviously be real, right? You want to say, here's what we do, okay? 9 times out of 10, this is what you're going to do. Maybe once a year we go out and do things like that. But that's, and then you point out too, if this is what some other companies are doing to you, here's what you can expect down the road. They're putting their best foot forward to get you, and then none of this is going to happen. Again, we deal where we want to be transparent, and we say we want transparency and we want honesty. That's what you need to do as the business. And then I think too, as the intern, what are you expecting to get out of this? You just need a summer job because mom and dad don't want you underfoot all summer, lounging around on the couch, eating all their food. They expect you to get out of the house. Or are you actually looking to test the job market and find out, well, I want to know what's going to be like,
One of the researchers here actually points to a 1998 research study that found that recruits for the U.S. Army who were given a more accurate picture of both the positives and negatives of the job had significantly lower turnover in their military careers than those recruits who were not given such information. In other words, it's the age-old thing, right, of it's better to be honest up front, because the other way to think about this too is like, if you have to dupe people into doing it, at some point they're going to realize they were duped. So what good did the, dog and pony show do if you couldn't keep them around after having done that anyway? Or arguably even worse, they stay around, but they're dissatisfied, unhappy, and unmotivated.
Which means how productive are they for you and the company? Right.
So now you've just created, a problem instead of something that could be beneficial. So I think I'm always about, try to set, to the extent possible, reasonable expectations about here are the good things about this, but also here's the bad things, and if you know all that going in, then you can't say later, well, I didn't know that, we told you up front. So everybody can be, I think, a little more confident and comfortable then with the tough things that are going to come along.
Yep.
So the next one is build a relationship. Robert J. Corey, founder and chief executive of Agile Rainmakers, which is a business development consulting and advisory firm in Chicago, hosts a series of individual 30-minute Zoom conversations with each intern who accepts a summer position in his company. Over several months, he builds a relationship with the intern by discussing topics such as school, the intern's interests, what's happening in the company, and what projects the intern might work on in the future. It's a 90-minute investment over 4 months. So when the intern shows up, you already know each other and their interests, says Mr. Corey. That 90 minutes will turn the experience into gold.
And again, if you're like me, you're sitting there saying, duh. But obviously, if somebody needs to say it and they're being pointed out that they actually do it, that means most people aren't, okay? Most companies aren't taking the time to do this. And we know when we've studied and we've read studies and talked to people about this generation coming up, they value relationships. They value being wanted and somebody being concerned about who they are and what their goals are. Okay, so if you're talking about a future worker, then if you meet those needs, they're going to want to work for your company more. You're going to keep them. And we all know that one of the biggest profit losses for a company is training. And if you're constantly losing employees to have to retrain a new one, better to put that time in up front and get to know them and know what their goals are and what they want, so that, and you tell them exactly what you expect out of them, then you both get continuing returns, which then make both of you happy. You have a happy employee, they're producing good work, and the machine keeps rolling. Make those connections. It's a lot easier to get people to do things. Then when you send that company email out, they read it and they know where you're coming from, and they read between the lines and they understand it, rather than having questions, comments, scuttlebutt, all of those things. You take care of it because you develop the relationship first.
And I think it's not just about making them feel good either. I mean, yes, there is a value to that, but it's also helping you understand your future employees. because you may learn from those conversations, yeah, this person's probably not who we need here. I mean, we always talk about the benefits, right, of even if you quote unquote fail at something, even if the internship is a failure, you still should have learned something. Because yeah, at its very best, you secured a future employee, or somebody who thought they were going to be an employee, who you thought was going to be an employee, you learned on a trial run, this isn't the right fit. Much better to have done that now than to find out 2 years into a job after you've hired them that, yeah, this isn't the right fit for them, after you've invested even more time and more money and more energy. So I think the building the relationship part, yes, it's good because it helps the employee feel valued, but it should also be a tool for the company and the managers to help assess whether or not these are the type of people, that you want working here. Are they a good fit based on your culture and based on what you guys are trying to do and the work ethic you expect and all those kinds of things? Because again, if you know more about your people, there's a better chance that you'll be able to get your people to realize their maximum potential and do the most good for you. So yes, it's good for the employee, and we don't want to downplay that, or good for the intern, but it's also very valuable to the company to invest that time as well. So if most internships are 8 to 16 weeks in length, what else is super important to do? Because that's not really a lot of time when you think about it. That's pretty quick. I mean, especially, if listeners think back to when you've started a job, how long does it take you to really get, settled in and figure out what's going on? I mean, practically you get settled in and you get a few weeks and then you're done on the short end. And on the long end, you don't get much more than a few more weeks past that. So how do we make the most of that 8 to 16 weeks? Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Make every day count. Companies have interns for a short time, commonly 8 to 16 weeks. So every minute counts. It's recommended that companies carefully think through what they want interns to achieve on a week-by-week basis. For instance, at his company, referring to Scott Redfern, who's an executive vice president of global human resources for a consulting firm, he says that during the first week, interns learn about the organization itself, its values, priorities, and how interns fit into the overall picture. Where do they fall in the structure? And not just reporting. I mean, as you read this, it's not just, basically everybody's above you, but how are interns part of the larger picture of our company? Why do we have interns? What is the point? And again, I think that kind of ties back into what we talked about before, which is that trust and, don't oversell, set reasonable expectations. Here's why we have interns. Be honest with them. We have you here because we're trying to build future employees and find the right people. That's why you're here. And this is how we're going to help you figure out, help us figure out if you make sense. The company also gives the interns introductions to leaders and helps them build networks among themselves and the rest of the team. The next few weeks are project-based. Then toward the end of the internship, the company organizes a day of service where interns pick a local project to volunteer on so that they understand that charity work is part of this company's culture. So if charity work's not part of your company culture, the point is choose a thing near the end that's a sort of a defining feature of what you guys do. This is something that will regularly take place. Are you okay with this? So you've gotten a sample of the work, of the people, and of the things that aren't exactly work, but are expected as part of the job.
Well, as you were reading that, I was thinking the way I structured my classroom. Teaching in the high school, many teachers, very content driven. Day one, boy, they're getting into lessons and they're doing this. And I would take the first week and we'd take a personality test and we'd talk about the rules and we'd talk about expectations. And people would look at me and say, "You're wasting valuable instruction time. Why are you doing all this?" I said, because if we're all on the same page when we start, I'm going to move a lot faster than you. And repeatedly, year after year, my students would cover more content than theirs, even though I would start basically a week, 2 weeks after they
behind,
would,
quote unquote.
because I laid the groundwork for this is what this class is about. This is the way it's going to operate. This is the way you as a student learns because you just did this. And we took the time to do that. Then when we hit the ground, there was no stopping in the middle of a lesson to explain what was going on. They knew what the expectations were. They knew how they learned best. And we just all moved right on through. And that's what they're saying. But that's really hard, right? When you're looking at the bottom line, I mean, I'm going to take a day or two, or in the case of that one company you noted, a week to lay the groundwork, and they're only here for 8 weeks. Yeah, very good time spent there because you'll get a more productive worker, a happier worker, which obviously is more productive. Agree wholeheartedly with that.
The next one, I guess I take issue a little bit with the wording. I don't disagree with the concept. The title of this one is Let Interns Multitask. College students are multitaskers, so giving them one project for the entire summer is like a death sentence. With multiple tasks, interns can avoid the likelihood they will be bored and frustrated when there is natural downtime. They also don't expand on this one enough. So first off, the multitask thing. No, we've talked about that on this show I don't know how many times. College students, old people, everybody, none of you are multitaskers. Well, I take that back. If there's 100 people listening to the show, there's probably 2 of you listening out of those 100 who are actual multitaskers, okay? Most of us do what's called task switching, which is high speed in the brain, moving between 2 different things, but not actually simultaneously focusing on both. So I get so tired of hearing that multitask. No, multitasking is a bad idea. It's not good. The concept here that they're talking about is don't hand them one assignment and then say, come back to me when this is done and I'll hand you one more assignment. Say, here are 3 or 4 things that I need done. Here's this filing
cabinet.
Right.
Go through this filing cabinet. It extends for 24 feet along this wall.
Yeah.
Start with the A's, go to the Z's. And that's your job is I want you to pull out any report that's in that filing cabinet that's more than 5 years old because we're not using it anymore.
Right.
Oh, great. That's, don't do that to somebody because nobody likes that.
And if you need that to happen, the point is it's okay to have tasks like that. But this goes back to, again, I think that transparency and clarity of where do you fit into the picture? What all, or not maybe everything because you don't want to overwhelm people, but here's 3 things I need you to do. I need each of these things done by this date. And then if you need more guidance than that, ask me and we can break it down into smaller stuff or just get it done.
But that's the expectation piece.
Right.
You're going to do this. Okay. This doesn't look, but after that, now I'm going to have you work on this.
Right.
And then once you do that, we're going to do that for a couple of weeks. And then we have this project we're going to work on. And then it'll be time we're going to close up shop and we're going to meet and we're going to talk about, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you accomplished, what you didn't get done. Okay, again, you lay it out. I know what the expectations are. Then I know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I will do this drudgery work because I know what I'm getting to, right? Or, I get this really fun thing. Then you expect me to do this. Well, I won't enjoy that very much. But then you're going to close with this good thing. Okay, again, the more upfront you are, the more you know what you're walking into, the more productive you can be.
And the whole thing of, there's certain days where a task may just not, you're just not going to be as productive at that task. If you have multiple things to work on, then each day can be more productive because it's like, well, I may not be able to make a lot of headway on this thing today because it's just not, I have days like that where I've talked to Lance before about it's like, today is not a day where I'm going to sit down and get a lot of computer work done. It's just not going to happen. But here's these 10 other things on my list. And these are all things that need to get done, so I'm going to do these things because I don't have to be sitting here and I'm not going to be very good if I do sit here. So I'm going to go do this stuff because at least then things are still getting done. Time is still being used efficiently rather than, well, I'm just going to sit here and force myself into doing this. And, I'll get through the day and have done half of what I would have done on a day where I would have been productive. Again, if you only give them one thing to do, it's like, well, then I'm just stuck with, I have to go through these files today and that's all I'm going to get done. And I went through 5 files today and most days I go through 50, but by God, I sat here and did that, and it's like, well, if you had given them 2 other tasks, they could have said, I can't probably do the files today, but I'm going to do this other thing. And now I made better use. Again, it's back to that time is money. Would you rather pay them to sit there and bang their head against the wall on a day where it's just not working? Or if they have several things to choose from, again, still got to get them done by the deadline. Everybody knows Lance and I are big on that, but like there's a little bit more, at least perception of freedom and a little bit more opportunity to be efficient. If you give them not multitask, but if you give them multiple tasks to choose from to work on.
Good way to put it. And the supervisory role there is to check in with them once a week or so.
Almost like the next thing we're about to talk about.
And how far are you along with those 4 things that I ask you to do?
Keep close tabs?
Over the summer. Is that what's next?
That's what's next.
Well, this is what you should do, right? Because you don't want to just say, okay, you have these 4 things to do. You have 8 weeks to get them done, and then check in with them at the end of 8 weeks. Because if you do, you've just set them up for failure because they don't know how long each thing should take. In my brain, okay, I've got 8 weeks. I've got 4. Okay, it's 2 weeks for each one. But as my boss, Justin, you might say, that first one should only take you a week. And the second one, it's going to take you a month.
Right.
And so what am I going to do? I'm like, oh, this is easy. And I'm,
right.
I take 2 weeks to do a 1 week job. And then I get into that month-long one. And I've only given myself 2 weeks. Now I'm a failure. Right. So, but if you're checking in on me,
yep.
Oh, well, seems like, because to your point of bouncing around, okay, no, it looks like you're making, if you keep up, you're making good headway, you should be successful.
Yeah. They point out that, the idea here is that interns don't necessarily need babysitters and they don't need you hanging over them every day. Also, my guess is that for a lot of bosses, right, those are probably not the type of employees that you want either. Do you really want somebody that you have to stand over the whole time? Because, if that is who you want, I'm not sure that you should be the manager, but, it's like, what's the point? If you have to hover the whole time to make sure stuff gets done, then why not just do it? Why not have you do it? Because that's no good. So you probably don't want to have to be a babysitter, but we do have to pay attention and take time to check in with interns. And to Lance's point, discuss what's going on. Well, how long, asking those critical questions of, well, how long do you think this should take? Okay, well, you think it should take this long. Okay, well, historically, when we've had other people do it, this is about how long it takes. Oh, okay, because they're learning something, but you're also not doing this thing where it's, I'm just totally hands off and I'm never going to see you and come back to me when it's done. And then they feel stuck, isolated and alone. And it's like, well, crap, I have a problem, but I don't think I should go to them about it because then they'll think I'm stupid, and it's like, and then they don't get it done anyway. That's no good. And
all the time you're sitting as the supervisor thinking, well, this is getting done and this is getting done.
Right. And then you find out 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, well, none of that happened. Well, what have you been doing? Well, I've been sitting here fretting about how to get it done. Well,
why didn't you ask? Well, because you didn't make yourself available and I didn't want to feel like I was stupid. Again, wait a minute. What did we just talk about there? I think that was communication.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we're talking about. You keep those lines of communication open, and that's what you're doing when you're keeping tabs on somebody. You might just stick your head in and say, hey, how are things going? You need anything? Everything, no, everything's fine. Okay. But at least then you've given them the opportunity. It doesn't have to be an hour-long sit-down meeting on Friday afternoon at the end of each week and go through a checklist. It doesn't have to be something boring like that, but just making yourself available as the supervisor and walking through and letting everybody know that if they have a question or a problem, that you are available and you're willing to help them. That's the key. It's that trust that you're building up.
They talk about one way to do this is like a short, 10-minute end of day check-in. Just what did you feel good about today? What did you struggle with? Was there anything you didn't understand? Because you may not solve all of it right then, but just the act of doing that at the end of the day is a nice processing maneuver. And it's probably going to make them more efficient the next day. And you as the boss going into the next day, okay, well, here's 2 things they were struggling with, right? So let's be sure tomorrow that we get those tackled because we don't want to go another week and not address whatever that stuff is. It'd be better to get it solved, out of the way, done. And again, if you're taking not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but a little bit of time on a regular basis, you're going to avoid those problems that fester, that boil over into this, oh my gosh, there's this huge, what do we do? And I think that's key, because nobody likes that boil over stuff that becomes this huge nightmare mess. It's like
the boss doesn't like it and the worker doesn't like it.
Yeah. It's no good for anybody. And it's also building that, keeping close tabs is you're going to identify mistakes when they happen, and you're going to be able to work through them sooner. It's just like, it is like, right, the working with children thing. Don't delay discipline, 3 weeks until after it happens. Not that you're disciplining here, but teach right then, or close to when it happens.
We used to call it in the moment.
Yeah.
You want to do it in the moment.
Yeah. You find out way later, it's worse for everybody. So, all right, there's still a little bit more to talk about. We want to keep close tabs, but if you're doing all this stuff, does what the intern's doing actually matter? Does anything that they're doing actually matter? Because I don't know about you, but it can be difficult. It can be difficult to do certain things when you feel like this is minutia that has no importance to anybody for anything. I'm just being kept busy. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. Make it real. Make it real. You want internships to be valuable? You only got them 8 to 16 weeks. How do you make them valuable? You make it real. Be sure to give interns work that is valuable to the company, Mr. Redfern says. Real work, quote, lets you see them in action, and it gives you more experience from which to make their job decision, he says. Another mistake companies make is to overemphasize the social aspects of the internship while underplaying day-to-day work aspects of the job. This sets the stage for disappointment and frustration when they join as a full-time employee and they aren't routinely taken on dinner cruises or to the elaborate social activities. So make it real and make sure that they're getting an actual sample of what they might actually do with the job, right?
Exactly.
If you have them organize a file cabinet, what your job's going to be is to organize this file room, and that's all you're going to do your whole internship. But the job you're going to be hired for, you're never going to organize a file cabinet in your life. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have them do that because you need it to get done. But it does mean if they don't get a sample of anything they're actually going to do,
what makes you think they're going to apply for a job
right
when one opens, or when you contact
if they do
them?
Apply for a job and they think, well, what I'm going to do is this, and then they find out, well, that's not what this job is at all. It's back to that expectations thing of, if you don't give them real work to do, they're not really getting an idea of what type of work they'll do.
Well, and you say, well, I can't do that because this is a very important customer for us, or a customer base. And okay, but that's why you check in on them. That's why,
keep close tabs.
You walk through it with them, and then they've learned that valuable thing. And then when you do hire them for a full-time job, then that's what, they will have some experience and know what you want, and they'll be more productive for you from the first day that you employ them. So again, I guess we go back to that beginning. What are you hiring an intern for? What is it, just to get all the drudgery work? Then go to a temp service, right? Just go to a temp service and pay somebody who just wants to work for a week or two to do those mundane tasks that nobody in the office has time for nor wants to do. But if it's an intern and they're working, you want them to get a feel for your company, then you have to give them something that is a day-to-day task that people in your company do. Now, obviously, you want to watch them closer than you would other folks because there's still, on-the-job training here, but let them go, see what they can do.
So what's the last thing? Stay in touch. Companies that want to increase the chances of the interns returning for full-time work should stay in touch after the internship ends through means such as webinars with senior management and personal phone calls. A lot of times, I was thinking about this the other day, when you're first getting an internship, you may be in your freshman, sophomore year of college. Like, even if there's a full-time job available, you're probably not going to go work for the company right then full-time. So you say, well, we've talked about all this great stuff and it sounds like a lot of it's preparing you for a job. What if they're not ready for a job? Well, then does any of this matter? Well, I would think so. If you're a company and you're about long-term planning and growth and vision, again, if you invested the time in somebody who you knew you couldn't hire immediately, then doesn't it make sense to make sure that you hold on to that asset by maintaining connection with them? Also planning ahead, right? Okay, well, great. You did an internship this summer, like you're going back to school. What do you want to come back next summer? Because now that you know XYZ, we could have you do this other stuff. I mean, there's some things like that where it's not like, well, it's over. Goodbye. I mean, yeah, you can do that.
Thanks. It was nice meeting you this summer, and
right. Good luck.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see you around. You never know when we might cross paths again.
But why, if you as a company have invested that time and energy, and if an intern has invested their time and energy from both standpoints, right, intern and company, why not keep in touch?
Okay, so explain to me, because you run multiple companies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So why bring an intern in if the odds are they're not going to work for you in the future? Why would you? There has to be something. I've watched you do that.
Yeah.
And I know here that the company that I work for, True Chat, we've done that on multiple occasions. So what's the thinking of ownership when you bring on interns that probably won't ever work for the company?
Well, I think that's one of those big things that goes back to, we always talk about those moments. You never know what moments impacted a person's life, I mean, sometimes we do, because sometimes they tell us right in that moment. But a lot of times somebody may come back to you and say, this one time that XYZ happened, like this is how this changed my life. And be like, what? I don't even remember that moment. How do I even know that happened? I said, what was that got to do with an internship? Well, just because they're not going to work for you forever doesn't mean that they're not going to be somebody in the future that's important somehow to you or to the company, right? You are laying the groundwork for somebody who's just setting out in their career, and it might not be for 5, 10, 15 years, but for all you know down the line, they may be a future client, or they might be somebody that your company is spending money with, right? They might be a future vendor. Or they might be a company that you have to collaborate with, or again, on and on and on of, there's a decent chance that having that connection will be valuable somehow. And if you provided them a good experience, that could do more for what you're going to work with them on in the future than any amount of goodwill when you first meet them after they've been in their career for 10 years. You know what I mean? Because you were the person, you were the company that took that chance, that helped them learn, that gave them a positive experience out of the gate. You've created a long-term asset, even if you don't know how that asset's going to play out. You've fostered a relationship that says, if we cross paths in the future, we know it's going to be a positive experience, instead of, they were here, they were gone, whatever. So, I think that's a huge part of it.
Which is that point of staying in touch.
Right.
Because staying in touch doesn't mean you have a weekly phone call.
No.
It doesn't mean that once a month you send them a postcard, but it means that, a couple times a year, once a year, you check in with them, right? And
yes.
And to your point, that happens all the time, being a former teacher and a coach, where you'll run across somebody who is now an adult and has a family or a full-time job, and you haven't seen them in 10 years, and they go, oh, hey, thanks. You remember when you said this? And you're like, sure. And they go, well, that meant so much to me. And that's what I'm doing with my children now. And, that's what I'm their, little league coach. And I'm teaching them those same things that you taught. Oh, great. That's awesome. And you walk away and you're like, oh, boy, I'm glad I'm starting to remember who that person was, that just stopped and talked to me. But you never do know when you make an impact. And when you stay in touch with them, then they might go into something like you said. And I'm just thinking of some interns we've had here over the last 8 years that, they could go into different aspects of the business.
Yep.
And we would cross paths, and because they had a good experience here, they didn't end up working for us, but they had a good experience and they left on good terms. that's not only a benefit for them because of the experience that they received while they were here, but it can be a good experience for us once they get into the workforce and start to do things. They'll come back and say, hey, I know where we could do this. Maybe they go into, advertising or something and they go, hey, I know where we could do some commercial work or some podcasting. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's our former. Oh, you're going to send this business our way?
Yep.
Just because
we know who to go to.
Right.
And even in the business referral, yes, but also the people referral, because remember that even if they're not going to work for you, there's a pretty good chance they probably know other college students, right? Or other people generally, whether they're in college or not. And if they have a good experience and they are casually, like maybe they're not even intentionally recruiting, but they're out there talking about, well, here's what I did for my internship. Here's what this company does. Here's what I learned. They may not even know they're doing it, but they're generating good PR and they're recruiting for you that whole time, So I think there's a lot of those benefits that are very difficult to quantify their exact value. But if the time and energy you put into an internship, you got a few things done that needed to get done, and they referred somebody to you that became a lifelong employee, that's almost as good as them having become a lifelong employee, right? So don't assume just because they don't end up working for you that it wasn't worth your time or energy.
How much of the company's time and money did you spend recruiting?
Right.
And you maybe got more out of it.
Well,
by having that intern.
You created a very knowledgeable recruiter.
Who also got work done for your company.
So, and probably built, hopefully a positive rapport with you. So there's a lot of, I think, those benefits that, again, can be difficult to measure in the moment, but in the long term, good. And I'd have to say that, hopefully there's a lot of people out there that just they feel like, hey, if we put good out into the world, hopefully good will come back. Maybe it won't be in a way that I ever even know that it came from that person, but pretty much every business that we've had, those connections are what make or break it. And you don't know a lot of the time when you're making those connections how they're going to impact you in the future. I would not discount even somebody that's, 20, 30, 40 years younger than you who's just coming into the field, because you don't know who they know or how they know, somebody. So why we have this show today, Lance? Was there a point?
There is. Our point is that here at True Chat, we have a mission. And our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And today we told you, it's that age-old thing. You get out of something what you put into it. If you do the work ahead of time and you talk to people and you check in on them and you give them a good experience, it's going to benefit you. That shouldn't be your motivation, but just because being a nice person allows people to do nice things for you down the road. And if you like listening to that kind of show and you tell your family and friends and they say they'd like to listen to us, you can tell them as a podcast. They can find the show on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast first thing in the mornings. Those same episodes can be heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States and parts of Canada. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.